Good evening, everyone. At this time, I call to order the third public hearing for the fiscal year 2026 millage rate. I now turn this portion of the meeting over to Interim Superintendent Dr. Taylor for him and his staff to give us an overview of the fiscal year 2026 tentatively adopted millage rate. Dr. Taylor?
Thank you, Chairwoman Dr. Simmons. Tonight we're here for the third of three required public hearings on the millage rate that supports the fiscal year 26 budget. The board will be asked to take action to adopt the final millage rate this evening. Chief Financial Officer Masana Mallett, if you could come to the podium to give us an overview of the millage rate.
Good evening, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. This evening, yes, is our third public hearing on the millage, the first two public hearings. Have it up again. Yeah. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, better. No.
I think they'll try technology. Okay, let's try this again. Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Chairperson Dr. Simmons, board members, and Dr. Taylor. This evening, yes, is our third final public hearing on the millage. Our first two hearings allowed for feedback and a robust discussion on the millage rate. This evening, I present the 2025 property tax millage for the FY2026 budget. In recommending a millage rate, In recommending a millage rate, we must comply with Georgia Code or state law. Statute 48-5-32-1 is on taxation and property. And of course, it includes this night's requirements to hold its third public hearing. We've had to hold 3 required public hearings under state law. We've adopted a tentative millage rate and received the final 2025 tax digest data from the county. We determined the budget needs with stakeholder input, estimated our property tax revenue, finalized the projected revenue. The millage rate was lowered by 0.2 of a mil from 19.10 mils in 2025's budget or 2024's tax, and down to 18.90 mils. We set the tentative millage rate of 18.9 on May 15th, 2025. This slide, of course, is our example on what a simplistic version of what is a millage rate, and it's available also on our district's website along with many other resources, both on our budget and the property tax process. So we won't really go over it again, but if our viewers want to take a look at that, it is available on our website. One of the things that I think we emphasized over the last 2 public hearings as well was an urge, or at least to ensure that all of our viewers and our community knows what exemptions are available. And you can visit the Gwinnett County Tax Commissioner's website, and there lists all of the homestead exemptions, in addition to which we have also listed those that are school homesteads in our FY2026 budget. This is the 5-year history digest showing the values in the taxes each year going back to 2020. Then, of course, comparing our 2024, which is the previous tax year, to the 2025 tax year or digest. And note the digest growth of 7.99% after exemptions, and with the tentative adopted mills of 5.3% growth for 2025. Also note on called out in that green section is the homestead exemptions, which grew 19%. This slide shows the millage rate if it was lowered even more, from 18.8 mils down to 18.7 mils, and then of course shows the increases in both. This shows the millage rate we're recommending in 18.8, lowering it to 0.3 of a mil to 0.3 mils, or lowering to 18.7, which lowers it now down from 19.10 to 18.7, or 0.4 of a mil. So why did we recommend lowering? We analyzed our financials, the revenue, the budget surplus, our fund balance reserves. We've discussed our fund balance reserves over the last few months in the budget process. We've considered community feedback, and of course our commitment to property tax relief for our community, our students, our employees. We also looked at the significant investments and the cost over the last 6 years, amounting to 2.7 now in the general fund budget, 2.7 billion. And then of course, a list of all of those investments made through the years. We've aligned our budget and investments to the strategic plan, the goals, and of course, still with stakeholder input. But we've also considered our implementation focus for 2025-26, which focuses on college and career readiness, each and every student, literacy and academic excellence, and of course, safe and welcoming schools, which is a top priority also for our community. So let's take a look at homeowner impact examples. And so to the far right, this is the home that we've been referring to with the assessment capped at 3%. This was the opt-out example. This increase from 2024 to 2025 results in a $15 tax increase for the property taxpayer. While the middle house shows if we lower to 18.8 mils, the tax increase is now 28 per year, which is closer to the $15 increase. But then when we look to the far left, which is the mills lowered even more to 18.7, it is even closer to the cap, $15 versus $12, of course, with $12 being even lower. So again, we've really taken a look in depth to see the impact to the homeowner as well. This shows the details of the increases in the digest. We talked about these in the last two public hearings, but really take a look to the far right where it shows our residential growth. We grew about 8.81%, and then our commercial growth 7.06%. This shows you there's not only growth and development, but there's also where the assessments are really have increased. Of course, it also, as we take a look at our neighboring districts, or at least the metro districts, this shows that our millage rate compared to Atlanta Public Schools, Cobb, Fulton, and DeKalb falls somewhere in the middle, closest, of course, to Cobb County, but still slightly above Cobb. Cobb is at 18.7. We would be 18.8 at the recommendation of 18.8 mils. Note to the right, though, what is also important to note is that Gwinnett County Public Schools clearly spends, or at least relies on less property tax as a source of revenue compared to our neighboring districts, which are significantly more or higher reliance on property tax revenue for their budgets. If we lowered then now in the example below to 18.7, we would be in line with Cobb County Schools, and again, still our property tax revenue compared to budget is unchanged. We've also shared before the trends that we've seen since 2019 to 2026, which clearly shows every year or every other year or so, there was an opportunity where we were able to lower the millage rate. And like previous years, there were significant gains in 2022, 2023 in terms of property tax digest. We had a lot of significant growth in revenue during that period. We were also supported with a lot of federal funds. But we've also fairly looked at what would be the negatives or the downside to lowering the millage rate. We've talked about many months where there would be potential cuts in the state and federal funding, taking perhaps guesses in terms of what our expected revenue would be, delays in taxes, and this is a list, I know we've gone through this before, economic factors, inflation, and so on. Then we also looked at the advantages, and the advantages really, starting first and foremost, is to provide financial relief for our homeowners, but it also does stimulate growth in the economy and spending. And it does then transfer to homes and families and community, and so that fosters that economic condition that's favorable in those homes, and those students are our students and our families. And then, of course, continuous feedback from our board and some of the other things listed here. This, of course, is once we've conducted all of our financial analysis, we determined that both 18.8 and 18.7 are feasible in making a good recommendation to lower the millage rate. Our top priority will always be student achievement, and as we consider the needs of students, families, and staff while planning for future years, we are significantly attuned to aligning our strategic plan and goals and objectives in terms of every decision that we make. Next steps, we will summarize tonight's discussions after hearing from our public. Board members will make and the administration final recommendations in terms of the discussions, and then of course we will be required to adopt the final millage rate. Upon that, we will submit to the county, and then of course the county finalizes the digest to submit to the Department of Revenue. To learn more about the FY2026 budget millage rate, visit the GCPS budget information webpage. Lots of resources. As a reminder, there's sections on just budget information, there's training and navigation videos. We will be enhancing and I think augmenting the information as time goes by. We have lots of grand ideas to make our information as transparent as possible, but useful to the community. And so that concludes my presentation tonight. I think we would all agree that we are very thankful of the board's support and of course the feedback and the discussions we've had in terms of what has been recommended and the administration's work. And I thank you for your attention. Dr. Taylor, this concludes my presentation, so I turn it back to you. Dr. Simmons, sorry.
Thank you so much, Chief Millard. At this time, I do want to open it up to our community member that we have with us this evening, Kay Vickers. If you can make your way to the podium.
Good evening. As I mentioned last week, it is disingenuous to ask Gwinnett residents to accept a 5.3% property tax increase, which constitutes an 18.8 millage rate, while proving fiscal irresponsibility. Two examples of your fiscal irresponsibility are the firing of two separate superintendents within the last 4 years, both of whom you had to continue to pay after they left. As a district, you purchased approximately $1 million worth of clear backpacks that you subsequently decided not to implement throughout the county. The board emphasizes student safety as one of its priorities, as well as a reason why residents should consider the 5.3% property tax increase as positive rather than negative. As I said last week, I represent the Grayson cluster. Grayson High School, a school whose capacity is 3,000, has over 3,700 students. Last Thursday, the school sent an email about buses filling to capacity prior to finishing their routes. My daughter told me that her bus has to take a detour to get to the school because the car rider line extends from Champion Way almost to Oak Road Highway 20 intersection. She told me that students have to exit the buses in 10-minute time increments, 6:35, 6:45, 6:55, because there are so many students that need to enter the building. I owe the board an apology. I firmly believe that if you do not contribute to the solution, then you are part of the problem. And last week, I did not offer solutions. Here are my suggestions. Eliminate the permissive transfer policy. If elimination is too aggressive, modify the policy so that all permissive transfer decisions are made at the district level only, and only children with a parent who works for Gwinnett County Public Schools and also lives outside of Gwinnett County are eligible. Monitor and/or police the residency affidavit process. And yes, I'll say the quiet part out loud, redistrict, something the school district has not done since 2015. Asking Gwinnett residents to accept a 5.3% property tax increase while simultaneously spending our money in the irresponsible ways I noted earlier, ways that do not benefit GCPS students, the same students whose safety and security you claim to care about, is equivalent to throwing a rock, then hiding your hand. Thank you.
Board members, At this time, I'll open it up to you all for any comments or questions regarding the millage rate. Ms. Stone, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Simmons. I have a few questions for the district. So part of my questions, I'm going to try to ask them in numerical order. I'm going to reference the presentation that we just heard. And I just want to, before I ask my questions, just to make a point of personal privilege and how much I appreciate the hard work that the district has done to create this presentation, run the numbers, take in our feedback, or at least my feedback, as well as stakeholder feedback. So I really appreciate all that went into this presentation and the amendments from last week to this week. My first question is going to reference page 10. So there's a chart right here where we see the alignment of the FY2026 budget initiative with strategic priorities, and I kind of brought this up last week. So can you shed light on, I know that the funding source, there's been some questions around increase in safety and security. I know that we have implemented weapons detection systems for our middle and high school. So that, can you clarify that came out of the capital fund or the general fund?
The majority of that is the weapons detection equipment. That's out of capital funds. That's not the general fund.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is on page 12. So going back to and I appreciate you all updating this chart with the houses. So we're looking at the homeowner impact and property taxpayer relief. So my question is, because I see a new calculation, we were looking at 18.8, lowering the millage rate to 18.8 to close, which is to close the 3% gap. And then now we see a possibility of lowering it even further to 18.70. So what is the difference between the 18.80 millage rate and the 18.70 millage rate and reduction? And then what is that impact on taxpayers and students?
On students, I would then start with saying that what you're proposing is that obviously there's a loss in revenue. So for every 1/10 of a mil reduction, we've estimated we would lose $6 million. So we would be foregoing additional revenue, okay? Because keep in mind, from the 18.9 millage, our budget is set. We've established our revenue. We've been very conservative in that step. Now this is additional revenue on top of that. So how much of that we're equating? It's up to 12 million. Funnily enough, in this instance, our recommendation also is going to, with the 2/10, the homeowner themselves, the impact will actually result in a much closer tax increase, because in all scenarios, you'd still have a tax increase. But with the 18.7, they'd have an estimate in this example of $12 versus the cap, which is even higher at $15. So it's even a lower increase.
Okay, so the 18.7 millage rate reduction will provide property taxpayer an even
Relief.
lower relief.
Right, a lower tax increase.
Okay, perfect.
The lowest, actually.
The lowest. Okay, thank you. And then could you also explain, I see this little box, and just to clarify for folks watching online, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the district is looking at, is this still accounting for a home at value at $420,000? So if we were to lower the millage rate to 18.70, property taxpayers would see a $12 increase versus a $28 increase if we lowered it to 18.8.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. And then could you also explain this third house on this chart, on this diagram? So what is the 3% cap?
The 3% cap is off to the right, so the 3% is going to be estimated at a $15 increase. The 18.7 is lowered to 18.7 mils. That's the 0.4 of a mil now reduction, or 0.4. That's going to result in the $12 increase.
The 3% cap is based upon the or the limitation of Prop
Yes,
581.
yes,
So
yes.
that's why she's using
House-
3%.
The House Bill
Yes,
581?
that was
Yeah.
the House Bill 581 I mentioned earlier. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I have just a few more questions. On page 14, I know that we have been looking at other districts, and I appreciate our district providing this chart. So on page 14, we're able to see where we currently potentially an 18.8% or 18.8 millage rate reduction versus an 18.7 millage rate reduction. And I'm going to echo what I stated in the past two hearings. I often wonder, if you can confirm that our millage rate it affects our property taxes, which is tied to our general fund, which is also how our employees or our staff are compensated. And I often wonder, if there is a correlation between, and this isn't a question, this is more just a general comment, I wonder if there is a correlation between staff salaries and the millage rate and that understanding. And my next question is on page, I just have two more questions. So on page, actually I have three. On page 19, there is a note about alignment to strategic plan priorities, and there is this 2C, this equitable resource allocation. So what is the district's plan as it relates to the conversation that we're having today? So what is the district's plan to plan for equitable resource allocation?
Well, I can tell you that we have already begun the process of an XVAT, which is that very formal cross-divisional advisory group process the district is used for very important topics such as this, to put together the review or exploration of the student-weighted formula or student-based budgeting, which is probably one of the most well-utilized equitable resource allocation formulas that's used across the nation. So this is what we're exploring. That's where we're at process. And then we hope to have some sort of understanding of a recommendation that would be coming forward at some point if we have to bring it to the board.
Okay. Thank you so much for that response. And then my last question is, so I mentioned this in the past two hearings that in District 1, overcrowding is one of our top issues. I'm also hearing from stakeholders which around the question with the staff salaries, but I know that the district has a plan or has demonstrated a plan to address overcrowding in the Archer clusters, such as the Harbins addition. We just now have the Mary Kay Murphy Middle School that will open soon. Does the district have a plan to address overcrowding in District 1 in the Grayson cluster at the high school level?
Dr. Taylor, would you like Mr. Burke?
The quick answer is yes.
Okay.
It's a multi-year kind of process. Really going to be contingent upon obviously the SPLOST referendum and what can happen or what plans we can put in quicker. Once that if we're able to get that positively passed, by our constituents. So, quick answer, yes. The more in-depth answer is there's kind of a moment where we have to wait till November before we're able to actually start to unveil some of those plans.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Chief Millard, for your presentation. As we initially back in May looked at the tentative approval of 18.9, based upon the voters' demonstration of concern over property taxes and their increase and potential relief and HB 581 and everything that went around that, I felt like at the time we'd probably need to double that just based upon my looking at the numbers. So I'm pleased to see that you are illustrating, especially in the house
slide.
picture slide, that from an overall perspective, if we adopt that 18.7 millage rate, that we have actually provided some relief, all things remaining equal, to the increased limitation that we would have had under Prop 581, or HB 581. And I think that's important because what it says to our constituents is we've heard you, and based upon the new assessed values, we're able to fund our budget, which was presented by the superintendent and approved by the board back in May. That extra millage, tenth of a mill, does not negatively impact our ability, based upon the budget we passed, to educate our kids.
No, it doesn't.
So if there were more money, yes, we could amend the budget, pull more money in, do whatever. But I think at this point in time, with the SPLOST referendum in November, to me, I think it's very important that we demonstrate to our constituents that we've heard them, that they want relief, and that to the extent that we can, we are giving that relief, even to the point where it would have even less impact, all things remaining equal, in that $12.40 increase versus the $15.28 that would have taken place under HB 581. So to me, that's incredibly important, and I appreciate you doing the extra work to get that done and to show it to us and illustrate to us. I think it's also important to note that in the increase that we're asking for, the state, based upon your numbers here, is shouldering a much higher percentage of that increase.
That's correct.
So as the state asks us to provide more benefits or passes on a salary increase through the governor's budget, or the various things that they did for safety, the little bit they did for poverty weighting, transportation, all of those things factor in. The state is actually bearing a larger percentage of our increase in doing what we need to do to try to keep up. The other thing I'm going to continue to emphasize is that we are, based upon the equalization formulas, not a wealthy school district in the state of Georgia. We're in the lower 50%, which reflects why we spend a little bit less per student. Because based upon our wealth per student in the county, we have less to draw on. And I think that, as we've heard from numerous people as they do their work here within GCPS, and I'll just refer back to recently Mr. Burke saying, outside looking in, wondering for years as he worked for another neighboring district, how in the world is Gwinnett able to do what it does on the money that comes in? It's because we do a really good job. And he's now a part of continuing that really good job that's done from a planning and a capital perspective. And I think the other thing that I want to emphasize is that with our vacancy rates less than 0.5% going into the new school year, there's not this demand for some huge jump in salaries. Now, I'm going to be the first one to say, having been married to a teacher and having teachers in my immediate family, that we would love to pay them more and more and more. But the reality is we have to do it within the limitations that we're given based upon what the state funds and what we can appropriately ask for from our taxpayers. And the fact that we offer so much more than just a salary, to me, is illustrated by the fact that we had virtually no vacancies to start this school year. So hats off to our HR team, but also to all of our school leaders, our building leaders, and others who make the culture of GCPS a place worth working at and worth working within. And so from that perspective, I'm going to continue to emphasize from my perspective that we need to go ahead and lower the millage rate to 18.7. Again, you've showed us that we can fully fund our budget, which is built around and aligned to our strategic plan. All of the metrics are moving in the right direction. And in light of the SPLOST referendum in November and the message from the voters in the last HB 581 vote, I think we are bound to respond in a way that shows them that we are willing to meet them and their sentiment where they are and do it as we control the buckets of funding that the legislators outlined for us. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Millard, for all the detailed information. Thank you to my fellow board members for their comments. I do have a couple questions and some comments. I'm going to start on slide number 4. Can you talk about why you landed on using 5 mils as the example for this particular kind of calculation? I'm just curious.
It's actually the sample illustration that we've been using in all of our area board meeting examples and what we have on the district's website. So it was just familiarity. It was simple to think or conceptualize the calculation at 5 mils versus 18.9 mils. Mm-hmm. So for simplicity.
Okay, simple rounded number. Okay, thank you. Slide number 7. Can you provide a little more detail and context around if we do decide to lower to 18.7, the increase of 4.2%?
Yes.
In that collection.
Correct. So if we did go to the 18.8 in the example above, which is the recommendation we have, published, obviously the increase is now a little over 4%. If we lower it to 18.7, then the increase is going to be 4.2%, or 47 million. Just showing you the differences between the previous page and the digest with the estimated increase of 5.3% if it was at 18.9.
Okay, so obviously the difference is
yes, just the differences.
Significant. Okay, thank you. And then bumping up to slide number 14. So it is fascinating to see how Gwinnett County Schools uses a lower percentage of their general fund. Can you kind of speak to why that is?
I think because it's at the level we're funded.
I see.
So obviously we're earning based upon our enrollment population and of course the state's formula. But that formula is not just around population, it's around other factors as well as state grants that we get that are state categorical funding. When you look at the other sources of revenue under the state, what we're getting with property tax obviously is supplemental and needed, but what we've done is we've already grown our investments in those areas using the property tax revenue that we feel was best for the budget as recommended over years, the investments we've made. That was that 2019 slide through history to 2026. But looking through the budget and the investments we've made over time, plus some of the mandated costs, state mandates costs, they've provided the revenue for those mandated costs as well, except for certified health perhaps. But we've also had a significant opportunity over the last few years to grow our fund balance. And a lot of those factors are of significant in terms of our fiscal stability. And then of course planning for the future, or what we can sustain or what we should sustain.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you mentioned about our fund balance too, because
Yes.
we are in a very healthy
Yes.
point and spot in time. So that is good that you pointed that out, so thank you. Yeah, I know that, and I said this last week, that, I always encourage our homeowners to take advantage of all offered exemptions, whether it's homestead, senior exemptions, school exemptions. It's something that's available to us. File appeals if that's something that you want to do, just because it is offered and available. Our speaker talked about it tonight. There is a little bit of, I want to call it maybe some financial fatigue by our community over the last 4 or so years of money being spent that probably shouldn't have been spent. And I think this is a great opportunity for this board to do our part to give back to the community as much as we can to help balance out some of that movement that we've done over the past many, many years. With that said, I can support also a full pullback to 18.7 to really bring us as close as we can to offsetting as much of 581 and to get us where we need it to be. Our budget is fully funded at this point. That is evident in the presentations around our budget, around everything you've talked about tonight, and we are where we need to be. And like Mr. Knudsen said, I would love to pay our teachers a lot more money, and that is where we need to, at some point, need to get to that point, and we want to continue to have those discussions to support our teachers and continue to support those that teach, our bus drivers, our custodial staff, our parapros, our everyone that's in that school building. We want to continue to support them as much as we can to keep them in their jobs and keep them happy. That is always one that's important to me. So I think we have an opportunity tonight to really make some significant change, and that is something that we all need to take into consideration. So thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Millard, for your presentation. Thank you for the information you presented, also including a question I had as well related to the exemptions. I first want to start off with expressing my empathy for homeowners. As a homeowner myself, and someone who is quite price sensitive, I recognize that savings are important. Any amount of savings is important. I also recognize the importance of investing in public education and investing in bridging the gaps that need to be addressed. And I believe we still have some opportunities to bridge those gaps. So for me, I stand in this space of both and. Yes, we have a budget that we've discussed. We had a millage rate that we discussed at 18.80, and now we're reducing it a little bit further. And my question is why? At the root of this, when we've had questions about class sizes, we've had questions about teacher salary, we've had questions about the investment in early literacy, I would pay, even in all of my financial and personal struggles, I would give $28 a year to invest in lower class sizes. I would give $28 a year to invest in early literacy and add that to the budget to say we can add more pre-K classrooms. We can build better, invest more in our building babies' brains. We can look at how we can remove our trailers from our schools. I would much rather have a conversation around, we've looked at already the possibility of reducing, but what we've decided to do instead is to invest in reducing our class sizes, because we know ultimately that the funding to reduce our class sizes will impact our teacher experience. It will impact retention. It will impact how they experience their day. I recently heard a story of a teacher right now, this is the beginning of the school, has 32 children. I heard of another teacher has 40-something kids in their classrooms. I would pay $28 a year to reduce class sizes, because I know the impact of doing that would reduce our discipline issues. The impact of doing that would ensure that our students could achieve academically. All of the data around class sizes and reducing that matters academically. And ultimately, when we support the academic needs of our children, it's directly correlated to our class sizes. Academic achievements directly related to our early literacy. So I would much rather have a conversation around how can we invest in $6 million that we're not, right, giving away, but we're saying that we will maintain lowering the millage rate, which we did, and I believe that being sensitive to the needs of the community, we did that. And I'm not sure why we're lowering it again. I'm confused about that, especially when we've already asked for the needs to be addressed, in particular around certain areas that need more investments. And now it feels like we're taking away. We have students who are homeless or who are experiencing housing insecurity. They are living in motels and hotels. They don't have the opportunity to purchase homes. We have families who can't even buy homes because investors are buying these homes. They're joining with groups, and they're spending money on homes and renting these homes that people can't even afford. When we have a millage rate that benefits all people, including our investors, that to me causes more problems than addressing the need of the housing for our community. Instead, I would much rather our school system work with our county to look at how we can provide more exemptions. Again, the exemptions address the needs of the community, the families who are struggling, the elderly people, people who really need the support. It will be directly addressed through homestead exemptions. How can we instead, again, holding this both and, because again, me too, as a homeowner, how can we use that $28 working with the county to say, can we have another exemption around the $28 for homestead exemption? I don't know what that conversation could look like, but I think it's worth having the conversation around the homestead exemption and moving that $28 there so that we can keep the $6 million. And then let's look at how we can address the needs of our teachers who have been saying for years, class sizes, class sizes, class sizes, class sizes is impacting managing discipline, class sizes impacting the academic achievement of our students. I again, am very empathetic to our homeowners, and I want to say that the $28 a year to me, in light of the volatility in the market, in light of the unpredictability in the grants and funding for schools, our federal government funding being reduced or eliminated, or the potential for that, so many different unknowns, and the volatility in the market is a concern for me. I don't understand how we've reduced it, which I support it, but not again, right, where we're in a market that is so unpredictable and public education is under attack. How can we continue to look at keeping that $6 million and investing in the needs of our students? So again, long commentary, and the question is why? Why, when we have these gaps that still need to be addressed that have not been addressed, why are we having a further reduction?
I can say from the perspective of we focus more on the how. Is it possible it is possible because of the factors I mentioned earlier. For instance, we were well within building a budget that also had contingencies and investments along the lines of some of the things you've mentioned already. So those were new investments in the FY2026 budget already. So we haven't seen those materialize yet. Obviously, there's always going to be unlimited needs in education. There's no way around that. But in looking at the increase, the additional $6 million wouldn't go very far. For instance, okay, I know it's $6 million, but let's just use class size reduction. Class size reduction is significantly more than that. But that's not to say that the $6 million is not $6 million, still $6 million. But in essence, we're above, and it's still being very, very conservative, what we budgeted. As well as we've also looked at the potential of loss of federal revenue. We've been doing this, months ago. So we know exactly where we are in terms of being able to position ourselves in the event of a loss of federal funding, as well as in context of to what degree can we go that would be reasonable and fiscally sound in making a recommendation in that effort.
Thank you. And so what I would say is for the schools that are at promise on the list that we have from the state, most of those schools are in District 5, the district I represent. So I hope the perspective that I share is also considered when the majority of those schools on that list that are deemed quote unquote failing are in District 5. And that $6 million could certainly benefit the areas and the schools that are at promise. I cannot in good consciousness say that I can support this when I myself, even with all of my own personal struggles financially, I would give $30 to help support the at promise schools, to support our teachers in lowering class sizes and ensuring that our teachers are happy and really set up for success in teaching their class. And all of this, again, ultimately impacts discipline and academic achievement for our students. One of the things I notice here is when you look at, there's page 16 and 17, I appreciate that you have the potential drawbacks for lowering the millage rate and the advantages for lowering the millage rate. The transparency here is greatly appreciated. I also just counted, there are 9 drawbacks to lowering the millage rate, and there are 7 advantages to lowering the millage rate. The drawbacks outweigh the advantages. And the drawbacks to me are concerning, in particular when we are looking at the bullets you have here around the state and federal cuts, in particular when you look at the impact around the stability and funding of our programs. When you look at inflation and economic factors, we're headed that way, it looks like, and that's a concern. And so I just wanted to highlight that, and I, again, would like for our school system to consider something differently, because I still don't see where we are addressing specifically the needs around those at-promise schools.
Thank you so much, Chief Millard, for the report and the diligence of your team in making the updates that we were able to capture this evening. It's very much appreciated. Just a couple of questions, wanting to make sure that I'm clear and that our community is clear on where we stand today. Regardless of whether the 18.8 millage rate is approved or 18.7, or if it were 18.9, can you clarify and confirm that regardless of which rate is approved, we will be fully budgeted. We will have what we need to address the budget that we approved earlier this year.
That's correct, and more.
So even if we pass an 18.7% millage, we would have even more than what we budgeted in revenue. Is that correct?
What it means is that we would have the funding that we need for our adopted budget, but we also have surplus funds. Our fund balance is growing, so we would have even more. But with regards to the property tax, yes, we would have even more.
Okay, and while we're on the slide around potential drawbacks, that first bullet notes potential state and federal cuts. I know this summer some of our funding was held up from the federal government. It has since been released. To date, have any funds been held up or not given to the district that we were expecting?
No, as a matter of fact, once the state board approved, the district went into the consolidated application process, so no.
Have we received all of the grant funding that we were granted last year?
We've gotten the carryover amounts. So the carryover plus the new allocations, the ones Title II, Title III, Title IV, those programs that have been reinstated, those are already supplemental to the budget. When I think the state board approved the grants, because of course we're the subrecipient of those federal funds.
Oh, okay, so those are supplemental, not a part of the general fund.
No.
Right, thank you for making that clear.
Yes,
I appreciate
special
that.
revenue.
We currently have a healthy fund balance reserve. I see that you all have, if we can go to slide number 18 for just a moment. Looking at bullet number 2, and coming to us with the proposal this evening, you all have anticipated inflationary costs that has been taken into consideration.
That's correct. That's already included in the FY2026 budget and the contingency for inflation. So even things that might have exceeded estimates or calculations by, the divisions in terms of determining costs. So we've built in some contingency for that as well.
And then bullet 4, internally reducing spending and optimizing for efficiencies. Can you speak a little bit to what's been done there?
I think we all know that we've engaged in a hiring freeze. I think that was the very first step. So you're talking about significant savings. Unused central office positions only. This didn't impact anything related to school or school-based positions. And then, of course, I think in terms of the work that's happening across divisions, whether it's facilities, technology, curriculum, all the divisions are engaged with. It's part of our executive conversations all the time. We're engaged in activities that are looking for efficiencies, whether it's consolidating technologies and things of that nature, but it's part of the work that we're all involved in.
So we knew from the start this was going to be an interesting discussion and not an easy decision for everyone on the board. I do want to note on this slide here that we're looking at with dropping the millage each tenth that we drop the millage, we're foregoing $6 million. So again, that $6 million that we didn't budget for, it would be an additional $6 million. The idea of that I brought up last week around what I'm hearing from community members about is class sizes and how it could be addressed. And of course, that would entail school additions or redistricting. My understanding is that the district would not be utilizing any of this additional revenue to create an addition. So none of it will essentially be able to help to relieve the overcrowding, which is something I really would have liked to have seen us be able to do with our revenue. But I do understand, and if I'm understanding correctly, the redistricting conversation is one that we will be embarking on here in the upcoming months, it sounds like before end of year. So we will be able to address the overcrowding in the way we traditionally have. I do want to also acknowledge that many of many of the board are not tone deaf, and we hear there is a desire for taxpayer relief, and I think many of us are taxpayers, homeowners on the board, so we're not tone deaf in that regard. We recall having community members come and address us during a discussion of House Bill 581, and so I appreciate that we listen to the community. We're responsive to the community. Since last week, I've heard from community about, what might be best, what they would like to see done in this situation. And so I appreciate being able to hear from communities, our community members and stakeholders in that regard. I will say that one of the things I look to with our future superintendent, whoever that may be, is strengthening our systems, being able to assess return on investment, as we're spending money and thinking about how impactful our programming is, because I'm not in the business of spending more money just to say we're spending more, just to say we spent X amount per student. But really what's important to me is that we gauge what is the return, was it impactful? And I feel like that is an opportunity of improvement that we have, and that I look for our future leader to help to develop and strengthen our school district in that regard as we continue to review how we're doing academically and approve budgets in the future, as well as think about what our millage rate should be. So I do want to circle back around to this idea of us hearing from the community. The reason why we opted out of House Bill 581, we said we wanted flexibility. We wanted the ability to be able to adjust our millage rate as we see fit. And so I want to, again, just thank you and the team for presenting the information as you have on today, as we prepare to make our vote.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons.
At this point, are there any more questions or comments from the board?
I would be remiss if I didn't say, for the community members who are watching this either now or later, that the $6 million that could be in addition to the budget that wasn't budgeted for could still benefit those schools that are deemed at promise, that continue to seek funding and innovations and ways to be able to bridge the gap around meeting the needs of their students. There are class sizes that are over the number that schools that are not in the at-promise schools have, right? There are concerns around the need to invest in early literacy. I absolutely understand the perspective around not having the money to build out a new classroom to then reduce class sizes. And I think just like we figured out a way to reduce the meals, I think that there's also some ways that we can figure out how we can use funds, additional funds, to be able to bridge the gaps that's needed in our communities. We have schools that's still struggling with residency affidavit issues. That's a direct correlation to the housing crisis we have, that investors are coming in paying for these homes that also benefit from the millage rate. I wholeheartedly believe that that $6 million, even though it may seem like a drop in a bucket and for our entire school system, but the benefit of that for those at-promise schools can make an impact in the achievement for those students.
Are there any other comments or questions? If not, I call on Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. The Gwinnett County Board of Education adopted the fiscal year 2026 budget on May 15th, 2025. As required by law, the district has advertised the tax digest history and held 3 public hearings on the millage rate. This evening, we propose that the millage rate be lowered from the prior year, which consists of 2 parts: maintenance and operations, or M&O, and a debt service rate. We are recommending that the rate for maintenance and operations be lowered to 18.70 mils for M&O and 1.45 mils for debt service. The total millage rate would be 20.15 mils, which represents 0.4 of a mil reduction from last year. Chair Dr. Simmons, I recommend approval of the final adopted fiscal year 2026 millage rate.
Board members, do I have a motion regarding the adoption of the millage rate?
I make a motion that the Gwinnett County Board of Education approve the superintendent's recommended millage rate of 18.70 mils for maintenance and operations and 1.45 mils for debt service for a combined total millage rate of 20.15 mils. The total millage rate will be reduced from the prior year.
I have a motion by Mr. Knutson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gasper. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I just have a few more comments, kind of what I reiterated in my questions, and particularly around District 1. You know, overcrowding is an issue. The district has a plan there for the Decula district. We've had a plan for the Archer cluster with the Harbins addition, with the Mary Kay Murphy Middle School, working at the high school level. We've been able to implement safety and security by weapons detections. The district, in conversations that we've had in our previous hearings and today, has accounted for state and federal cuts. And, you know, we talked about staff salary, and this is a priority of mine. As a former recent GCPS teacher, just 2 years ago, I worked 3 jobs. And then when I had a family emergency, I had to take on a 4th. So I understand some of the challenges that our staff are facing. I went to the grocery store a few months ago, ran into a teacher who is a single mom, has served in GCPS for 14 years on a master's level and works at a local grocery store on nights and weekends just to make ends meet. And so this is a concern, and I am, you know, we are in conversation with the district with the HR salary study, which I have been informed today that we are fully budgeted, that we will start that process this month. So I am hoping and looking forward to the district championing staff compensation with this HR salary study, addressing overcrowding while also prioritizing taxpayer relief.
Any other comments? Any discussion?
I just want to comment on our board that most of the at-promise schools that impact all of our school system, right, our entire school system, is in District 5. I know that I'm also the representative of District 5, but I don't just represent District 5. I represent the schools beyond District 5 that have needs. And if, regardless of a school, whether it's in District 5 or not, if there is a need, I will stand by that need for any school, for any child. And we are not whole in District 5. And I have been for years asking for support and for our board to look beyond their own districts, but to also look at the needs of District 5 that continue to be ignored. And I do appreciate that we have made some strides, so I will not sit here and say we have not. We have made investments in multilingual learners. The multilingual learners, I celebrate how we've made some intentional efforts around funding. And I must say that we still have issues that we need to address that is not being addressed in the current budget. And if we have the opportunity to take that $6 million and invest it in early literacy, invest it in after-school programming, invest it more in mentoring, invest it more in meeting the needs of those students, that's what we should be doing.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
There are 4 in favor and 1 opposed. At this time, board members, I need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I have a motion by Mr. Gasper. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Stone. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. It is unanimous. We are now adjourned.